Hi everyone, I'm Nina and welcome to my channel where I do drawing tutorials, art experiments and art vlogs. And in this video I want to show you how to draw a realistic eye with a tear. But before we start, I would be really happy to see your comments under this video and your like. Actually, I try to answer as many comments as possible. But anyways, let's get started. First, I'll introduce the materials. For this video, I will be using graphite pencils. Of course, I don't need the entire set, I'll take a few, for example 2H, B and 3B. It's absolutely okay if you have only one pencil, you will still be able to follow the tutorial and get a cool result. And if you don't believe me, you can just check out my tutorial where I draw an entire face by using only one school HB pencil. I will also be using brushes for blending because I like when everything is smooth and looks realistic. And for little details, I will be using a blending stump. We also need erasers. I'll be using two. One is a kneadable eraser. It's very comfy to use it because you can shape it the way you want. And the second one is a pencil eraser. Once again, it's absolutely okay if you use your normal school eraser. I love using black pencils when I draw because I believe that graphite pencils are not dark enough, so when I want to get that realistic deep look, I always go for black pencils. And the last thing that we need is white jelly rolls. As you remember, we're drawing an eye with a tear, and to get that look, that wetness in the eye, we need something white, and that can be a white jelly roll. Alternatively, you can use maybe white paint. Let's get started on sketching the realistic eye. I usually sketch by using a 2H pencil. Of course, I'll be using a reference picture. Here it is. If you want to, you can pause the video and take a screenshot. I start by sketching a circle that represents the eyeball. Don't press too hard on your pencil because we're gonna erase all the extra lines later. By the way, stick around to the end of this video because I have gathered some fun facts about the eye. To find out where to put the pupil and the iris, I'm drawing a cross in the middle of the eyeball circle. If the eye was looking straight at us, you would be crossed dead in the center of the eyeball. Don't press too hard on the pencil when sketching, as these lines will be guidelines that we will erase later. Next up, I'm drawing the pupil. The size of the pupil actually changes with your mood and the light in the room, but for this one I'm actively using the reference picture to get the size about right. After that, it's time to sketch the iris of the realistic eye with a tear. The size of the iris you find by kind of drawing the line halfway between the pupil and the outline of the eyeball. But as this eye is slightly looking up and to the right, I'm using the reference picture to get it right. You can actually look in the mirror if you want to double check the proportions. It's time to sketch the eyelids. Basically, they consist of an almond shape, but notice that the upper crease of the eyelid slightly covers the iris, whereas the lower crease doesn't. If you don't get this right the first time, please don't despair. I don't think anyone just nails it. Take your time, look at the reference picture, and forgive yourself if it's not perfect. The entire reason to sketch up first is so that you can actually correct your mistakes as you go along. I am also minding how I sketch the tear duct. You see, the eyelids always start from the narrow and even sharp shape of the tear duct, So to get it right, you need to be aware. Next up, I'm defining the upper crease of the upper eyelid. It almost follows the shape of the eyeball and kind of wraps around it. Underneath the eye, we have to define the so-called waterline of the realistic eye. You do that by sketching a parallel line to the lower lid line. It starts out thin and becomes even thinner as we move towards the tear duct. Once again, it takes a little time to get it right, so please do multiple attempts if you can't get it right on the first go. Remember, it's absolutely normal that the sketch needs a few corrections as you go along. Here, I am also marking the lash line. Again, I'm drawing a thin parallel line to the lid, and I'm even throwing a few fake lashes just to give the eye sketch that realistic feeling. Don't worry, we will add lashes later, in the very end. Because this is an eye with a tear, this particular eye needs to have a very wet look and feel to it. So I'm adding extra reflections, because that extra wetness in any eye will make that crying water reflect light and surroundings even more. Remember to give the reflection a little roundness, to give the illusion that they slightly wrap around the eye. And let's not forget about the shape of the actual tear running down the waterline. I'm sketching it in the middle as gravity kinda makes it run to the lowest point of the eye before it drops all the sadness to your chin. When I'm done sketching, I'm erasing the guidelines. It would look silly if they stayed in there. Look, isn't it nice? If you didn't get the same result, it just means you need to practice this part again until you improve. While you're watching, I want to tell you 5 fascinating facts about eyes. So fact number 1, your eye can distinguish approximately 10 million colors. Comment your favorite color. Mine is pink. I like pink. Number 2, emetophobia is a fear of the eyes. Apparently this kind of phobia exists. Fact number 3, your iris, the colored part of the eye, I hope everybody knows this by now, has 256 unique characteristics. And just so you know, your fingerprints have only 40. Fact number 4, blue-eyed people share a common ancestor with every other blue-eyed person in the world. Fact number 5, it is impossible to sneeze with your eyes open. Challenge accepted. No, I'm not going to show you right now. But yeah, that's it. These are my 5 fascinating facts about the eyes. And now let's continue the tutorial. It's time to start shading the eye and filling in the sketch. First, I start by filling in the dark black pupil with a black pencil. Notice that I'm avoiding drawing on the reflections, as it's easier to draw around it to erase it later on. In other words, do not draw on the reflections. With my 2H pencil, I am filling in the iris with light strokes, covering the entirety of the surface. Once again, avoids the reflections. Then I take my brush and blend the graphite of the iris lightly. With my B pencil, I draw the outline of the iris. Don't push too hard on the pencil. It's better to go over a few more times than to press too hard and ruin the drawing. For the next layer, I'm using the same pencil. It's important to know that the lashes cast a shadow on the iris and eye, so I shade the upper part of the iris so it becomes a little darker. I'm also shading the rim of the iris to be a little darker because it gives the illusion that the iris is round. You need to smoothen out the graphite once in a while to give it realism. If you're going for hyperrealism, this is where you slow down and give it all the details. But doing simple realism will actually make it look really cool too. Next up, and this is the part that really adds personality to the eye, is the texture or pattern of the iris. I start by drawing spikes coming out of the pupil using a 3B pencil. I do the same kind of small spikes coming out of the rim of the iris. Some of the spikes are darker and some are lighter, so I'm also using my pencil eraser to pull out some highlights. The darker the pattern, the darker the eye will look. So if you, for example, like me, have hazel green eyes, you need to do something with a medium value. At the end, I use a black pencil to exaggerate the lash shadow. When I'm satisfied with the iris, I move on to shading the white part of the eye. I think it's called the sclera. First, I draw up the eye like this. Then I use my 2H pencil to shade around the almond shape of the eye. If you're in doubt, slow down and add layer by layer. In that way, you don't make it too dark. Remember, it's supposed to look white. To make it look really smooth, I blend out the graphite. The brush itself can actually hold a little extra leftover graphite from earlier, so be careful not to make it look dirty by overdoing the brush smoothing. Once again, remember that it needs to be darker where the lashes cast shadow. I got a little ahead of myself with the detailing part, and with a very light grip and pressure on a very sharpened pencil, I add in the veins of the eye. Of course, I'm adding the veins to add to the dramatic effect of our crying eye. Did you ever notice yourself crying? Yes, your eyes become red and swollen from all those emotions. Remember, those tiny veins need to wrap around a round eyeball. Now I'm filling in the tear duct using a 2H pencil, and like the sclera, I'm shading it around the edges to make it pop out in 3D. The next thing I'm going to do is to shade the upper lid of this realistic eye with a tear. I kind of shade along the edge of the eyelid crease to give it that 3D realistic feeling. I also darken the lash line a tiny bit. This is where the eyelashes will sit. Now it's time to draw the eyelashes. I am putting them one by one. I use my black pencil and I start by curving them down and then upwards. If it's hard for you to draw the eyelashes, you can practice on a piece of paper next to this eye drawing, or watch my full tutorial dedicated to making you a lash drawing expert. Also, it's a life hack to keep the pencil very sharp. In general, grouping the lashes and being aware that they point in different directions should get you there. And remember, patience and practice is key. After the lashes, I decided to shade a little more around the lashes and upper lid to make it come together nicely. Also, and this is a really cool trick, draw the lashes in the reflections of the eye to make it really look 3D and realistic. You might wonder why I left out the lower lashes. It's because we need to draw the tear first. Let's do it. Basically, I begin by shading around the teardrop. That's because a teardrop actually drops a shadow by distorting the light that it reflects. Don't forget to blend it out. Next, I'm shading the actual tear, and here it's important that you leave a white edge. Also here, I will shamelessly make a plug for my water drop drawing tutorial on the channel. Go watch it if you struggle with this part. I'm using my eraser to make a white reflection in the middle of the teardrop. That makes it look like the wetness is coming out of the paper. I even draw up the edges of the reflections to make it stand out. When the tear is done, I'm adding the lower lashes using the same principles as the ones above. Except here, the hairs curve up and then downwards. Notice once again how grouping the lashes makes it look more even and realistic. The very last thing is to give the eye that overall wetness I was talking about. That will give it that awesome dramatic effect of crying. I'm adding wetness to the lower part of the eye by erasing graphite. That makes highlights and reflections. You could just put reflections all over, but it's better to put them where the water of the eye is gathering around the edges, as I'm doing it here. Then I'm taking my white gel roll because that will add even more sharp and wet highlights. I'm adding it just under the lash line. I even dot around a few extra spots to make it look glistening. I urge you to play around with the wetness of the eye, just be careful not to overdo it because it will stop looking realistic then. This is the end of my video, guys. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Thank you for your comments, likes, dislikes, and see you in the next video. Bye bye!